Now to the Republican who disagrees, though, with that Republican, that extending tax cuts right now is the exact wrong thing to do. He's got a little bit of record of questioning their wisdom. Back in the early 1980s, of course, I was just a child, but Ronald Reagan took David Stockman to the woodshed for dare worrying out loud in a magazine interview about tax cut-induced deficits. David was the Gipper's budget director then. He's a very powerful, much followed, widely respected Wall Street titan now. So, David, not a fan of extending these.
Well, the answer is it's probably the worst thing we could do except for all the other choices. The problem is the party's over. We've had a 30-year spree of massive debt creation. The economy's laboring under $50 trillion of public-private debt. The Fed has been on a reckless money printing spree for decades now. Fiscal policy was bad when I was worried about it in 1980, but those deficits were tiny. We now have $10 trillion.
What were the deficits at the worst when you were budget director?
The worst deficit was 6% of GDP, and that was for a very short period of time. It is now 10%, and it's stuck. And what I'm arguing is that people say, well, now is not a good time to cut spending or raise taxes or address the deficit because the economy is fragile, weak, and so forth. I think the news here is the recovery's over. It was tiny. We had it. It was a little bit of an inventory.
So this is the best we can do, and now
this is the best we can do.
As good as it gets to raise taxes?
We are now in the slog and swamp of trying to work our way out of all this debt.
So you think we might as well raise taxes now?
I think we should cut spending now. We're going to have to raise taxes now, but the key thing is...
Why can't we just cut spending?
Because there's not a consensus to cut enough. I tried in 81 and 82, and you know what...
You know what? I want to take you back for the woodshed for a second. So, but let me... Here's what I think happens. We're so inclined to say just raise taxes because we can't keep this going. Well, we don't seriously address the spending part of the equation. It's like paying more for a lousy product. You know you're getting a lousy product, but we want you to pay more for it because we got to keep the product going. And that sends a wrong message too, doesn't it?
I think it does, but also we've had a 30-year referendum on spending. President Reagan raised the issue of the welfare state. What do we want as a people? What don't we want?
Well, aren't the people saying, David, look, we don't want this?
Yeah, but the people have sent Republicans to Congress for 30 years who did nothing. They sent Democrats to Congress for 30 years who made it worse.
David, I fully agree with you. You and I have chatted about this before. Republicans have abused this privilege. Yeah. Democrats have abused it. They all read from what you think the same choir book, but they're lying through their teeth. So... You know, if Republicans were to take control of Congress and all that, I mean, they're held to the same standards to cut this spending. You just give up on it. You don't think that's going to happen?
No, I think we need to do both. But I'm saying there's not enough spending realistically to cut, given a $1.5 trillion deficit, 10% of GDP. Let's say we reform Social Security and make it means-tested, and so that the upper half of the spectrum gets much less. We might save $100 billion. Let's say we got rid of farm subsidies. We might save $50 billion.
Take all that out, though. You were right there at the beginning of the bull market, the 80s bull market. That's what, 18 years?
That's right.
Did you ever appreciate the magnitude of the revenues that would be coming from Wall Street?
Yes, we did. We had those projected in, and the deficit was still too large. And when we couldn't
the problem was Congress, Republicans, Democrats alike spent like drunken sailors.
But let's say you didn't do that. But the thing is, it's the same old record over and over. We're at the same place in 2010 that we were in 1981. People talk about spending cuts. People talk about government being too big. And
so you think that even if we got the revenues from tax cuts that conservative supply-siders argue would be the case, they'll just do what they've done in prior incarnations and spend it all?
I think that's part of it, and I also think that the revenue that we need, hundreds of billions of dollars on top of spending cuts, can't be gotten in any other way. We should close loopholes. But unfortunately, we can't afford this tax cut. The American people deserve it, okay? They have been punished very badly by bad economic policy for decades. But unfortunately, sooner or later, you got to pay your bills. You've got to pay for the government that collectively you decide.
You're dead on right about paying the bills and all that. I just think your eye shades here are too great and too focused on just the static nature. Here's my argument. That we don't appreciate the magnitude of the message you would send the financial community. Just said, all right, your taxes aren't going up as much as we told you they were, or they're not going up at all. What's more, we could cut them. And all of that unleashes something that we don't appreciate its magnitude. And that lifts our GDP. It's a big contributor to GDP. As you know, David, better than perhaps anyone who's ever had that job.
Yes.
You just lift the GDP by an extra half a percentage point or a full percentage point. You drastically change those
No, that's not true any longer, Neil. That was true in the early 80s when we didn't have a balance sheet weighted down with debt.
No doubt. I'm not what I'm saying here.
So
we have a CBO that's factoring 2.5 to 3% growth.
We can't even get that. That is too optimistic.
Now, what if it's 3.5 to 4%?
If it's 3.5 to 4%, it won't make any difference. The deficit will stay over $1 trillion. Every month, we are borrowing $100 billion a month from the bond market of the world, the Chinese, the Saudis,
right,
and so forth. Our GDP is growing at $50 billion. We're borrowing 2 times the growth of our whole economy.
Well, how do you know that
month.
raising taxes on anyone, rich or in between, gives you the revenue? States like Maryland have tried it. Surtax on millionaires in New York, they've tried it. They had a surtax in New Jersey on the upper income. They tried it. They actually lost revenue. So who's to say it's an automatic?
Well,
that
I'm
it
just
generates
saying,
capital.
No, I'm saying there is a offset, okay? There is a cost to pay. You will get some loss of economic activity, but you're not going to lose 100% of the rate increase that you put on. No one has ever proved that. No one has ever argued that. So I'm saying by
that definition, you're arguing against the supply side, as you say. You cut taxes, exponentially revenue soars. You don't buy that.
I think it goes up a little bit, but not nearly as much as what you cut.
When was Reagan on to you?
Well, I don't think he ever believed that a tax cut would pay for itself 100%. He believed the taxes were too high, the economy needed to be liberated from the heavy hand of Washington, and that would generate economic activity. I believed it then, I believe it now.
But, you know, we're looking at a different perspective, right?
Pardon?
I mean, when you guys were reducing the top rate from...
Yeah, 70%.
Yeah, 70%
okay.
to...
But when you go from 36 to 39, as much as I dislike it, and as unfortunate as I think it is, we're going to have to let it happen, and not just for the top. Everybody who's getting this income tax cut is going to have to give it up until we can get our finances back in order.
That's assuming you're going to generate
or
something out of it.
They will. Of course you will get more revenue. It costs $300 billion.
Your friends on Wall Street talk to you when you say
Yes. Well, I think there are people on Wall Street who actually support this point of view.
No, you're right about that. I have actually talked to a few of them. But I always come back to the same notion of crappy product, don't pay more money for it. And we always do it because, like you say, it's gotten so big, well, you can't not do all the stuff we're doing. And you're right, the American people have come to kind of expect a lot of services. But into hyperdrive now, we got to slow it down, right?
Yeah, but if the Tea Party were to become as massive and as successful as someone might dream, and we got a totally new Congress and a totally new culture in Washington, then maybe we could cut enough that what I'm saying wouldn't be necessary, but I do not believe it's going to happen.
Okay. I know you've revisited many times. I wish we had so much more time. I love having you on as a guest. That great woodshed moment that was made such a big deal of almost 3 decades ago, what went down? What happened?
Well, it was a very difficult moment because that story carried innuendos.
You were critical about the deficits in the Atlantic.
Okay, right? I was worried about the size of the deficit. I was worried about defense spending getting out of control.
Did Reagan think you had turned on it?
No, I called the Pentagon a swamp of waste. You know,
there's some colorful language in there.
That was true in 1981, and guess what? It's even worse today. So there was a lot of unfortunate phraseology in there. Because
what did Reagan say?
He was very upset about it, and well, he should have been.
Did he curse?
Well, he never did. He was
did he just say, "You disgust me"?
No, you know, that was a long time ago, so I don't remember the exact words.
Oh, come on, you do. The President of the United States is coming.
It was an experience, and it taught me a very good lesson about being very careful with journalism.
Well, David Stockman, agree or disagree, you're one of the most honorable people who've ever served in Washington.
Thank you.
And in the end, both sides hated you, which I respected a great deal. That was something to be said of you.